Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to our niche cast for the 19th of March. Coming at you at a very interesting moment in Aotearoa sport. We've got a pretty amazing thing in the Plunket Shield with Michael Bracewell taking 8 for, and spin bowlers reigning supreme in that game as well as around Aotearoa. So we'll be touching on some Plunket Shield cricket. We've got the White Ferns T20 series against England starts today. So we're recording our podcast prior to that game, first of 5 T20s, so we might touch on that as well. We had an amazing weekend of Wellington Phoenix men's footy. Less so the women, but we'll be here to digest it all. Got a full slate of rugby league shenanigans as well as NBL finals where a couple of Kiwis are doing their thing. So we'll be diving into not a top line, multiple Aotearoa teams in action, black caps and all sorts of stuff happening. But we're still out here doing our best for Aotearoa sport. And we're from the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sport. That's where we do our deep dives. We're also whipping out Monday and Friday newsletters via Substack. They come out every Monday and Friday evening, full of Aotearoa sporting information, especially the Monday banger, just recapping all sorts of Aotearoa sport from the previous weekend, including some weird stuff with the All Whites in their FIFA series. You did a bit of investigative journalism and you found, what, in less than a minute, what'd you find?
Well, because they're playing this little tournament thing, which is called the W Cup. And it started from me writing a preview about it, wondering, what's the W Cup? Well, I look it up. It's the Wins United Cup. Wins United is some kind of seemingly UAE-based I don't know, football consultancy firm. Their website's vague. It like seems to claim they do everything, but it's not specific about anything they actually like do. But then they moved it away from the UAE, and New Zealand football said it was because contractual obligations weren't being met. UAE aren't part of this tournament; they were just hosting it. So that gets moved away to Egypt because the 4 countries that are participating: New Zealand, Egypt, Tunisia, and the other one, Croatia, the best of the 4. They kick up a fuss about it, but then I looked up an Egyptian source and they said it was sponsorship reasons. And then I looked up Wikipedia, and their Wikipedia page for the website thing has disappeared. For the tournament has disappeared. But I looked up the previous edits, and at one point there was an edit that said that the tournament collapsed because they found out the company Wins United that was organizing it was a fake company. So that got scrubbed from the internet real quickly, but there's definitely some kind of shenanigans going on there. And yeah, I did dig into that a little bit in the Monday email.
That allegedly fake company that you're referring to, it does seem like a similar entity to what all the FIFA corruption dramas were about, where they had like these sports marketing companies that
inserting themselves as middlemen to get big payoffs and stuff.
Yeah, whereas like, what does your company actually do? Oh, it's just a vehicle for you to get lots of money. So, so the point, well, the key thing there is that this tournament has moved from the UAE to Egypt, but it is part of a FIFA initiative to play small series featuring a mix of nations. And I mean,
well, it is now. FIFA have that initiative in which starting this year, which they're trying to make a point of just to get teams that aren't the big countries that can organize sellout home games whenever they want to. Those other countries where it costs them money to play games, they're putting them in little like sort of mutually beneficial 4-team series, exactly like this. So this was something that mirrored that, but now because of the Wins United thing, and it's got a different name now, the tournament, it's called like the ACAB. So I don't know, it's not ACAB, not ACAB, but something that sounded like that. ACUD, yeah. It's like it's like the new sort of invented business district outside of Cairo, where apparently Cairo's like the most crowded city in the world, so they're trying to move a bunch of the business stuff to a fake city outside of it, which will become a real city once you move the stuff there, right? And they've built like a 90,000 seater stadium there. but it's not ready. So they're still going to play the games in Cairo, even though it's sponsored by the place that's supposed to be taking stuff away from Cairo. So I don't know how that works. But they swept when the main initial organizer thing fell apart. They seem to have secretly swept it into the FIFA series banner. So now this is part of those tournaments. When as before it was just sort of being like a sneaky one made to look like one of them. So I guess FIFA came to the rescue in some way, shape, or form in this case.
Don't want to go too deep down this tangent, but you've described how a fake company was the main backer of a fake FIFA series.
Sort of, yeah. But
That's
with
weird.
real teams that were going to play real games, which is where it gets weird.
That's very strange.
So like they were going to turn up and it was going to be like just a bunch, those kind of stories where someone signs. There's a famous one where I think Harry Redknapp was coaching somewhere, and I can't remember who it was, but it was like the best African player in the world at that time. A guy rang up claiming to be him, telling Harry Redknapp that my nephew's really good, you should sign him. And he actually signed him, and the guy turns up and is the worst player anyone's ever seen. It was just a scam. But this was actually going to be real games, and it still will be real games. So there's somewhere beneath the scam there was some actual football, which is why it's strange.
I think ultimately it's beneficial for the All Whites and New Zealand football because they just get some games organised.
Yeah,
I assume for them by FIFA against a wider variety of teams than they might usually play. And the All Whites are playing more games these days, but my intuition tells me. So that's cool. I like it. Good wrap up there. That was part of our Monday newsletter. Also had a lot of New Zealand A stats from their series against England A. Had some rugby league notes that we'll touch on here today. All sorts of Aotearoa sports notes and nuggets are found in our Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack, thenishcase.substack.com. And if you have a paid subscription through Substack, you can then access our subscriber podcast that we record on Thursday, a couple of days after the Nishcast. And that is also available for the generous folks on Patreon, both of which are great ways to fund the Niche Case if you do enjoy our New Zealand sports coverage. You can upgrade to a paid Substack subscription. You get the Monday and Friday newsletter completely free, and then you can help us out with a paid subscription, or you can jam a Patreon subscription as well and support us through there, or you can make a donation through Buy Me a Coffee or whatever you want to do. And of course, your presence here, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's through the podcast, airwaves, or if you're just on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Instagram, maybe you're on TikTok, however you're enjoying the Niche Case, we appreciate you, and you're helping us out. So big up to you, big up to Aotearoa. That's what we are here to do. Let's get some mindfulness. What do you got?
Well, you know what? Old mate Ram Das got me again. Got another one from him who starts off his thing by saying, why do we keep listening to spiritual lectures and reading spiritual books? And might I add, doing spiritual mindfulness segments at the start of podcasts. Nice. This is how he got me.
Wait, can you just can you reframe it and just say, why do we do mindfulness at the start of the podcast?
Yeah. Why do we do? Ram Das says, why does the Niche Cash do podcasts at the start of mindfulness segments at the start of their podcast? Because it seems we need to keep saying it to ourselves over and over again until we finally hear. I told you, he got me there. He got me with that one. I'm sitting there looking for a mindfulness, and there's one that explains exactly why I'm sitting there looking for a mindfulness.
Well, and it sums up why we do the mindfulness perfectly. I thought he was going to poke fun at such ideas. I thought Ramdas was so enlightened and so beyond where us mere mortals are that he was going to be like, why do people read spiritual things when they could da-da-da-da?
Yeah, right.
But instead, he was like, we just need reminding of a bit of gratitude, a bit of generosity, a bit of groundingness and connection with others. So shout out to Ramdas and shout out to this mindfulness segment.
Yeah, it's all just, chopping wood and carrying water, right? You just got to keep doing it. The process is the enlightening thing.
I do have an apology that I need to make.
Is this leading into our Warriors segment?
it's the lead into the Warriors segment.
Right.
Because I've watched a lot of NRL footy over the past few weeks, and it seems as though the announcer trying to start chants isn't a Warriors thing. It's a league-wide matter. Because it's happening in a few games, and keen NRL observers will realise that aside from some Dolphins throwback bangers, and they do love Sweet Caroline apparently at a Dolphin Stadium in Redcliffe, so that's cool for them. But it seems like a lot of NRL stadiums, they play the same songs over and over again, and they are kind of hyphy, atmospheric jams. But the ground announcers at different stadiums are trying to generate chants, and I still find it very strange. But I want to apologize to the Warriors because it doesn't seem like it's a specific Warriors thing. It seems like it's an NRL directive. We need to be as cringe as possible with our fans and starting chants. So I do want to rectify that. I'm sorry to the Warriors and the ground announcer dude at Mount Smart. And we do have a game coming up in Christchurch this weekend, this Friday, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see if that Jerry travels down to Christchurch to whip the Canterbury folks into a frenzy, although I don't think they'll need it. But that observation kind of stemmed from watching the Dolphins beat up on the Dragons. And I'm curious about your views on some of the Dolphins Kiwi-NRL players, because you were playing against Jeremy Marshall-King. And he did get a whack in the head from the old footy. I appreciate the humour around a Falcon's cool, except when the dude is concussed. Then it's like, well, someone just got knocked out, but we're having a giggle about it, you know? Like, we don't have a giggle about these things when someone gets a head-high shot. That doesn't really happen. But because he got smoked in the head by that footy from Ben Hunt's boot, and he was wobbly, he was pretty much concussed, but we're all having a giggle about the Falcons. So, Falcons to me are when the ball drops on someone's head, not when the ball is absolutely slammed into the side of their face. But Jeremy Marshall-King, I'm curious on your thoughts on him. Jermaine Sako, Jesse Bromwich was solid in that game as well. What did you think about the Kiwi-NRL players who beat up your Dragons?
Well, for a while there, they just kept getting injured because I think Cody Nikorima failed. He failed in HIAA, and then he went out, and then Jeremy Marshall-King, after getting slobbered in the side of the head from a kick, which, I mean, part of the reason why it was also a little bit, I guess, the comical aspect played up is because they did have that one perfect camera angle of him almost looking at the camera with as he was stumbling down, looking back yeah, he got me kind of thing. But then also the way he obviously stumbled is I don't know. I think he might have actually been hit quite hard there. But then he played on. He did have a check, I think, but then he played on and actually was probably one of the Dolphins' best players there. I don't know, the way the Dolphins won that game is they just came out with more energy, and then they maintained more energy and intensity throughout the game. And it sounds like that's a basic thing, but when the other team doesn't do that, it doesn't have to be a basic thing. It just becomes a winning thing. And they kind of just, because they ran up the score in the last 20 minutes, but they were also on top throughout pretty much the entirety of the game. And whenever the Dragons got a chance, they fumbled or did something stupid, made a bad decision, or just dropped the ball, or whatever, or gave away a penalty. But I think, it feels like there's a few of the guys from that Dolphins team who maybe stand out. Marshall-King being one of them, is someone who you can obviously see the ways in which he's getting them on the front foot as the dummy half guy. But then I also think, some of those. I think both Bromwiches were playing, were they? I can't even remember.
Kenny was 18th man.
Kenny was 18th man, is that it? Did they use him? Because they did have a guy out with concussion.
Don't think so.
Yeah, I can't I can't recall. But yeah, you can see the ways in which like there's the obvious ones, but then there's also like there's no one who wasn't a part of that, who wasn't a cog in that machine getting them going forward. So I think like that's probably one of those um like Jesse Bromwich for example, like a kind of veteran performance where you just fly under the radar, but you do nothing wrong and you make everyone else around you better, kind of thing, and allow others to kind of get the spotlight moments. Like it's I don't know, they were good there. I thought that might be another winnable game for the Dragons going in, and then quickly found out maybe not. Maybe I've overreacted to the Dragons' first week performance against the Titans team, who also might not be very good.
I find the Jeremy Marshall-King stuff really interesting because he and Brandon Smith didn't play for the Kiwis last year. So the Kiwis, they win 30-0 against Australia without Brandon Smith or Jeremy Marshall-King. So now I'm thinking, okay, how does a Kiwis team look with those dudes in the team, or at least available? I think the combination of Jeremy Marshall-King starting, Brandon Smith coming off the bench is fantastic. And I think Jeremy Marshall-King, he's kind of underrated in how important he is for the Dolphins, how important he can be for the Kiwis. But you've also got Brandon Smith just starting for the Roosters, playing big minutes, just going about his crafty dummy half mahi as opposed to the real boom bat powerful Brandon Smith that has previously existed. So two dummy halves playing at a high level. It's pretty interesting. You've also got Danny Levi starting dummy half for the Raiders. They're 2-0. So he's in the mix as well. But I think Jeremy Marshall-King's a very good hooker. And the way the Dolphins were playing against the Dragons, they were saying it a lot in commentary, just plowing through the middle. A lot of that stems off the back of the subtle skills of Jeremy Marshall-King at dummy half. And if you're the Warriors and you're playing without Wade Egan, well, you can see how that hinders their performance. They were solid against the Storm, but the issue is that you lost the game at home. So the game in Melbourne, which is always going to be difficult to win, you're putting yourself behind the starting line there. So I'm not too fussed about what happened against the Storm, because that's just one of those. The way I was reflecting on it was, that's like the Black Caps playing against Australia. There's nothing really over the course of history to suggest that the Warriors will go to Melbourne and beat the Storm. And in Test cricket especially, there's not much to suggest that the Black Caps are going to beat Australia. You hope for the best, but you just kind of know what's going to happen. Even though the Warriors, like the Black Caps, they're in a winnable position, they're in a strong position, that you just know that it's going to be very difficult to beat the Storm. It doesn't matter how well the Black Caps were playing against Australia or how dominant a position they were in. You knew that Australia was going to do something, and you kind of just felt and knew that the Storm were going to do something as well. But as we roll through the Phoenix, the Breakers, any other team that's going to be playing in a cross-Tasman competition, because I want to chuck this out there, I think within the next 5 years you might have 2 A-League teams and 2 NRL teams from New Zealand. And in the next 10 years, for sure, you're going to have women's teams for all 4 of those teams. So, be prepared. We're literally going to double and triple, maybe quadruple the amount of teams and players competing in Australian competitions. So that is definitely going to happen. I'm big on the Christchurch NRL situation, which I might touch on in a jiffy. What was I saying? But that is to say, the teams competing in Australian competitions, you need to win your home games. And that's the thing for the Warriors, is they need to win their home games, and losing to the Sharks at home, going into an away trip against the Storm, that is niggly. And it doesn't, the Warriors can be as good as they want to be, but their hopes for the season are determined by how they perform at home, and that's going to include coming up against the Raiders, undefeated Raiders in Christchurch. I wrote in the newsletter yesterday that it's been I don't want to present this as like doom and gloom for the Warriors, but this is the reality of where they at to start this year. They are 0-2 in the NRL, 1-1 in New South Wales Cup, and they are 0-2 in Jersey Flegg. You can expand it out. They're 3-4 in SG Ball. They're 4-2 in under 17 Harold Matthews. But I don't really care about the results at those levels. I just want to streamline it to the top 3 grades. They are 1-5. And all 3 teams have a negative points differential. So if we're thinking about the hype for the 2024 season and everything that has led us to this moment with the New Zealand Warriors, a couple of weeks into the season, they're 1-5 across the top 3 grades. There is ample room for improvement across those grades. I think, there's no reason why the Warriors are not a top 8 team, given what we've seen to start the season. I think that's still what we're aiming for. But the reality is, especially in the NRL, when you're like the Warriors were a good team last year, but now there's a bunch of teams who were bad teams last year who are now good teams. And every team is kind of just like seeking the improvements. It's a very competitive league. You can't just roll into the next year and assume you're going to be good because you were good last year. And it's very tricky. It's far more tricky to assess matters in New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg because players are moving in and out. The Jersey Flegg team might be full of 19-year-olds, or the New South Wales Cup team might be full of under 21 players. You can't really assess the performances there, but as a whole, kind of big picture, holistic look at the Warriors' top 3 teams, they're 1-5 and they've conceded more points than they've scored. So that's the reality of the start to the 2024 season, and it'll be very interesting how that looks moving forward, especially because they're coming up against a very difficult challenge in the Raiders in Christchurch.
Yeah, and that Raiders team have been very good through the first 2 weeks, and they're one of those teams that doesn't tend to start that quickly, but then also builds into their season really well, which is kind of what the Warriors are having to do this year, whereas the Raiders have started rapidly. Warriors are in that position where they came into a season the first time in at least a decade. I mean, it's hard to judge when we know that Warriors preseason expectations and Warriors season happenings don't always align. Like, it's a notoriously optimistic fan base, understandably so. But here there's like justified favorites tags. Maybe not so much. Like, these were 2 very tricky games to have first off, which is the other thing to keep in mind for perspective, is like the Sharks are the type of team that could tip the Warriors over in their home conditions, and the Storm away is just as hard as it gets, full stop, for anyone. But like, this was a season where the Warriors came in being like, oh, we were legitimately good last year. Like, we were excellent, and a top 4 team. And here comes the you make the top 4 one year. Your next thing is like, well, how do we improve on this? Well, let's try and make the grand finals. Like, that's the kind of expectations you might have. But yeah, like you say, it is. That's not an easy thing to do, because a lot of teams improve from year to year, and there are teams that can improve who have a lot more room to improve than trying to go from top 4 to top 2 or whatever. Like, and that is why complacency exists, because teams get good and feel like they remain good, and then you don't quite do this. Like, it's not a matter of negligence. It's just a matter of everyone gets better from one year to the next year. So if you only get better by a little bit, well, you're actually falling behind in comparison to other teams. So I think there is a little bit of a wake-up call there for the Warriors, which maybe they needed, maybe they didn't need, I don't know, but they've got it either way. So this becomes a very big game, because you don't, I mean, it's a long season, but you don't want to be starting 0-3. And this is another tricky game. And I'm sure at some point the fixture list will look a lot kinder, because you do play everyone at least once. So it does balance out to some extent over the season. less so in this than like, English football or something where you just play every team home and every team away. So it all does literally balance out. NRL is a little bit weird because you don't play everyone twice, but that's yeah, it's not a must-win game because it's far too early to be throwing out things like that. But it's would much prefer to win than lose kind of game, given how they've started, and it's the Raiders will not be an easy task.
As you were talking there, I was thinking how the NRL, I think this applies to a lot of sporting competitions as well. If you're the Warriors, so you came out of nowhere to finish fourth, I think, or third last year, you need to get better to stay at the same level.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily we need to get better so we can finish higher in the ladder. It's that you need to get better and improve, build chemistry, build combinations, just get better generally to finish in the same spot that you did last season. Because there's a bunch of other teams coming for that spot in the NRL, so you need to get better to stay the same. It's a bit of a oxymoron, but
And also teams have seen you. You're not a surprise package anymore. Teams know that the Warriors try to play in a certain way and will have plans this year that they did not have last year in order to combat that.
Very important to note that the Warriors didn't have Egan against the Storm and haven't had Shans Nickel-Klokstad fullback to start the season. They are two starting spine players. So if you take the starting fullback and the starting hooker out of most NRL teams, they're not going to be as good. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Yeah, the Warriors might go 1-3, but I think Shans Nickel-Klokstad is really important to the team. And Egan, I said prior to the start of the season, Egan is going to be and is the most important player for the Warriors. So if Egan's not playing, then they're not going to be as good. So that's just where we're at with the Warriors right now. They will be playing the Raiders. The Raiders they're coming to Christchurch with a lot of Aotearoa talent. Not necessarily Kiwi-NRL juniors, but a lot of talent who is either from Aotearoa or wants to represent Aotearoa Kiwis. Someone like Sebastian Kris, he's already played for the Kiwis. Seems like he's just going to keep pursuing that Kiwis path. So he's an interesting lad to watch out for. This has been recorded prior to the team list, so I don't know for sure who will be playing for the Raiders. But, I mean, Joseph Tapine is one of the best middle forwards in the competition. Jordan Rapin is in fantastic form. He's from Wellington. Joseph Tapine is from Wellington. Danny Levi is from Wellington. You've also got Ata Mariota, who is from Manurewa, and he is coming off the bench. He did play a bit of edge forward, I think, against the Tigers. He's usually been a middle forward, but he might be doing a job on the edge, but he's going to be coming off the bench probably. Then we have Matthew Tomoko, and I did throw out the hot take that you said was straight off the barbecue about Morgan Harper versus Stephen Crichton. I'm holding steady. Like, it was an unserious take. Morgan Harper is not better than Stephen Crichton, but I am holding steady because the Eels lost to the Panthers. Morgan Harper kind of had to move to the wing. So then he was defending on the wing as a replacement for Bailey Simonson, who got injured. But then the Eels kind of had to do a fix-it job on their left edge. So I'm not necessarily connecting the Panthers' domination of the Eels down that edge with some negativity towards Morgan Harper. I'm still sympathetic to the Narua Wahia Jr. Morgan Harper. But if that was straight off the barbecue, I think we're coming out of the chili bin to say Matthew Tomoko is the best centre in the NRL.
Is out of the chili bin, that's a colder take, is what you're saying.
It's chilly.
The safe bet sort of thing. He's been absolutely brilliant in the first two rounds, and he had a fantastic season throughout last year. I remember that game he played against the Dragons where he just like every time he got the ball, it was a line break. So not only is he outstandingly good, and there's no one could even doubt he's one of the better centers in the thing. Obviously, we're going to lean further into that because we have our perspectives, but he's also one of the more fun centers to watch as well. Like he's super exciting.
So you referenced last season. I like thing about Tomoko. He like this Kiwis team that defeated Australia. Tomoko was doing his thing. He was powerful. He was nimble. He was agile at centre, and the whole team was pretty damn impressive. But last year, Tomoko, he came out of the gate debut season, averaging 100 meters per game. Then he goes 111 meters. Then he goes 109 meters. So he goes from around 110 meters per game up to 158 meters per game last season. He has leapt up again to 193 meters per game this season. So that's the Tomoko rise. He's hovering around 100, 110 meters, then he goes up to 150 meters, then he goes up to 190 meters. And you know if Tomoko's averaging 190 meters, blokes aren't tackling him. He's so dynamic, he's so powerful, so agile, really exciting, fun player, as you said. But that's kind of in tune with the quality of players coming out of Aotearoa, because we had a fantastic performance from Dean Mariner in the Broncos win, chip and chase, just real good footy. Because he's, as a winger, he has to take a lot of the tough carries for the Broncos. And like he's growing into the NRL kind of frame. He has put on size without losing speed, because his speed was on show against the Rabbitohs, not only in attack, but also in defense. Like he can absorb his own defensive reads, whether it's a right read or a wrong read. He can absorb that just with his pace, because he can jam in and then chase back. So he showed his pace with and without the footy, but he's also put on some size, some muscle, so that he's real powerful now, which is useful when you're carting the footy out of your own end. He is a fantastic player. He was dominating footy in Australia as soon as he moved over from Aotearoa. He's a Marist junior, but there's also stuff about he played junior footy for Manurewa before that. So he's the manner in which he dominated footy in Australia for Palm Beach, Currumbin, and in that Broncos system, like suggests that he's just going to stay on the wing for the Broncos now, especially because he's taken that opportunity. But he was already doing crazy stuff in Queensland Cup in prior seasons to this season. And I don't really see a situation where he can do what he's doing in the NRL and then go back down to Queensland Cup. It just straight up feels like he's too good for a reserve grade. So I think he's just staying solid on that wing for the Broncos. They've got Jesse Arthurs on the other wing, so suddenly we've got two Kiwi-NRL wingers for the Broncos. Xavier Willison still hasn't played, which is a bummer, because I got pretty hyped in the opening round because he was named and he hasn't played yet. So that is what it is. But you've also got Jordan Ricky. So Jordan Ricky is on the edge for the Broncos, and Jordan Ricky is the leading figure, along with Jermaine Sako. Maybe Jermaine Sako is the leading figure because he's played a bunch of tests for Aotearoa. Jordan Ricky still hasn't played for the Kiwis yet. So again, the Kiwis defeated Australia, and Jordan Ricky hasn't even played a test for New Zealand yet. But where are those dudes from? Jordan Ricky, Jermaine Sako, they're from Christchurch. What's going to happen when the Warriors go to Christchurch? You're going to have a massive crowd. Because what happened when the Warriors went to the Christchurch to play a trial game? There was a massive crowd. And what's happening in Christchurch? There was a lot of buzz about rugby league, but as the Niche Cage always says, Aotearoa loves rugby league outside the Warriors. Like, the reason the Warriors bandwagon is the Warriors bandwagon is that there's so many people in New Zealand who love rugby league, and when the Warriors are winning, boom, we're on that bandwagon. But that means that there's also a lot of rugby league fans in Aotearoa who just love rugby league. They love other NRL teams. Their kids play rugby league. They play rugby league. all the cultural tournaments around rugby league in Aotearoa are firing. But the Canterbury South Island bubble is particularly interesting, especially because you've got the Auckland FC, whatever it is, football team. Well, now there's a new bid for a Christchurch team, NRL team. So that means that you've got one kind of newcomer to a Christchurch bid, but you've also there was an older bid that the new bid thinks they're doing better than the old bid. But so those things are happening. Meanwhile, Jordan Ricky, Jermaine Isako, where's Griffin Neame from? He's from Greymouth, West Coast, across the Southern Alps from Christchurch. There's Tanistella Smith, he's in the Warriors system. St. Thomas of Canterbury, they just won the National Secondary Schools competition last year from Christchurch, which means the best rugby league school in New Zealand is in Christchurch. A bunch of those players have moved into NRL systems. Sasaya Alatini, I think he was already with I don't think he went to St. Thomas, but he's now with the Bulldogs. You've got guys like Callum Donaldson, he's from the West Coast. Again, another West Coaster. Riley Pascoe hasn't played for the Dragons under 21s this year, but he's another West Coaster who's in the Dragons system. You've got Sheldon Haywood, he's in the Bulldogs. You've got Casey Newton-Whare, he's with the Storm. Lennox Tuiloma, he's with the Warriors. Oliver Lowry has moved from the Tigers to the Sea Eagles. The Fa'atili brothers, Felix Fa'atili scoring tries for fun with the Sharks. You have Caius Fa'atili with the Sunshine Coast and the Melbourne Storm. Takato Cranwell scored a try for the Knights SG Ball team, I think it was. This is just a very small kind of off the top of the dome example of the Kiwi-NRL talent come out of Canterbury and the South Island. It's honestly quite baffling, but also really impressive because it seems like every week I'm learning about a new Kiwi-NRL junior from Christchurch or the South Island. This week, one particular example was Noah Harmer Campbell. Noah Harmer Campbell, who was in that St. Thomas of Canterbury team. He is now with the Warriors under 21s Jersey Flegg team as a dummy half. And he's pretty interesting because he was in the New Zealand Secondary Schools tournament team or squad 2 years in a row. And he also helped St. Thomas of Canterbury win the championship last year. But that's just an example of okay, who's this guy on the team list? Quick Google search, he's from Canterbury. And that seems to be happening for half the Kiwi-NRL juniors I'm looking at the moment. And every week I'm learning about a new one. So it's really impressive what's happening down in the South Island with rugby league. And it sets up this weekend's game against the Raiders. The Warriors game versus the Raiders. The Raiders NRL group don't have anyone from Canterbury or the South Island, but they do still have Jack Sanford, who went to Christchurch Boys High School, and I think he's in their under 21 group. He might be in the New South Wales Cup, but I think he's in the new, Jersey Flegg group. So even the Raiders, who don't have a Kiwi NRL player from the South Island in their NRL squad, they have recruited someone from the South Island into their system. So it's good stuff there, and that is to say there's a huge market for rugby league in the South Island, and it looks like there's a huge market for football in Auckland, because 18,000 people showed up to watch the Phoenix play Sydney FC, and before we get into the footballing matters, the pitch invader was wearing an Auckland FC shirt. The Auckland FC Jokers were there at the game. But I don't want to assume that 18,000 fans who showed up to watch the Phoenix play at Eden Park, I don't want to assume that all of those fans are going to become Auckland FC fans. Because I think the Phoenix fans in Auckland are pretty hearty Phoenix fans. And they've showed up for a lot of footy in Auckland over the years. that is just to set up what was it was kind of weird, but a really interesting environment because it was a big crowd. It was a crowd that reflected the Wellington Phoenix as the best team in the A League, but it was also in Auckland, just as Auckland FC starting to get going. And even though 18,000 people showed up to watch the Wellington Phoenix play, there was still this kind of Auckland FC cloud hovering over the game as well. What did you make of that whole situation?
Well, it's absolutely could not have been an accident that they announced a bunch of stuff about that franchise in the week leading up to the Wellington Phoenix playing their last home game in Auckland. Obviously, they'll start playing regular away games in Auckland from now on. I find the rivalry between the two pretty cringy at the moment, though, if I'm being honest. Like, and that goes both ways. Like, there's a little bit of antagonism there, like announcing that stuff ahead of the Phoenix's home game counts as antagonism. Whether or not there was any like actual, I mean, we don't know how the Pitch Invader got that shirt because those aren't for sale. So you got it from somewhere. Whether that was an organized thing or not, either way, Pitch Invaders are cringe in general. Like, it's stupid, it's dumb, and you're making a spectacle.
Either way, he got smashed.
He did get smashed.
And if you're like, if you're going to be a Pitch Invader, regardless of your intention, because I imagine some people in the world probably thought that Auckland FC Pitch Invader, his intentions were jovial and fun and woo. You got smashed.
Yeah.
Any Pitch Invader in New Zealand is going to get smashed. And you just got to know that you're going to get smashed because, I mean, when you're watching...
security guards at New Zealand sporting events are mostly... They've got union and league backgrounds for the large part. Like, these dudes can tackle. Even if they don't have those backgrounds, they can still tackle.
I think it's more that their mission objective is to smash any Pitch Invader.
Yeah, not just to stop you, but to hurt you.
It's a green light on smashing Pitch Invaders, and rightly so. So, yeah, cool. You are a Pitch Invader wearing an Auckland FC shirt. How's your ribs?
Yep. How's the rib rattling go? Yeah, but I will say I find it a little bit cringy from the Wellington Phoenix side as well, trying to be like, you know, showing up the plastic fans for the new team or whatever, or you know, starting a few of the Phoenix fan groups have already seemed to be trying to stick some knives in, like, we hate these guys and they're our big enemy kind of thing. It's like, well, they don't even exist yet, you know.
Like, that stuff, I think that stuff's awesome because there's nothing else like it in New Zealand sport at the moment. So I don't, the rivalry, yeah, you can feel it's a bit cringe, but I think it's all good. I'm more interested in the situation where 18,000 people showed up to watch the Wellington Phoenix. Where do you think those fans are going to be? Are they going to be Auckland FC fans? Or are they going to be Wellington Phoenix fans? Because I think Phoenix fans are Phoenix fans. I think the Phoenix identity is pretty clear. I think their mana is established. I like the Wellington Phoenix. I don't know if I'm going to switch favoritism because I kind of love the Wellington Phoenix. But I think it's wrong for the Auckland FC people to assume that those 18,000 people at Eden Park are automatic Auckland FC fans. Because I think there's some sort of mana with the Phoenix and that connection with that fan base. And those 18,000 people showed up to watch the Phoenix. They weren't there as a giggle with Auckland FC. They were there to watch the Phoenix, the best team in the A-League, get busy.
Yeah, and that's an important point there because the Phoenix are embedded. You know, there's people who have had, the Phoenix they've been the only option for people wanting to support an A-League team in this country for quite a while now, and they've saved their best ever season for this particular, like the one immediately before the Auckland team turns up as well, which means that the buzz is at an all-time high, and that, yeah, there will be holdovers with that. That's not something that's going to be just because there's suddenly a different team in your area that people are going to automatically swap. The Eden Park crowds have routinely been amongst the best that the Phoenix get. Pretty much, they have been the best that the Phoenix get every season. Every season they've been doing this. Pretty much, the Auckland people turn up. That's a population issue, but it's also like it also shows an appetite. But it shows an appetite, yeah, not just for watching good quality professional football, but also for watching the Wellington Phoenix and supporting a team. Those have been parochial crowds. Those haven't been just people turning up. Like, for example, uh, those Women's World Cup sellouts that we're getting. Like, people are turning up just because you're watching world class football. It doesn't even matter if you support a team. You don't. You're watching the Spanish women's national team on their way to winning the World Cup. You don't have to support them to just be like, I want to be there and see that. Some people, I'm sure, will just the convenience of having a team playing home every second week is that they're going to make that switch nice and easy. And I don't think that's something that people ought to be like ashamed of, because people were supporting a team from outside their region anyway, because that was the option. Now there's a different option. There's work to be done. I'll put it this way. Like it's not something that's going to happen automatically, but I think it's something that can be achieved if an Auckland team starts doing the kind of stuff that the Phoenix have been doing, and winning games, obviously quite important, playing good football, signing and entertaining, enjoyable players, both imports and locals, and also quite specifically, I think, developing young players in a way where kids are seeing a pathway coming through. But it's like the Phoenix have got players now playing for them who grew up supporting the Wellington Phoenix. And obviously that's going to be at least a decade before Auckland FC can claim the same thing. That's not something that happens overnight, in other words. So it will be a weird dynamic, and it is definitely something to see how that unfolds over multiple seasons, because I think there will be a bit of sort of flash and cash about the first year, but when the sort of smoke dies down, what is the actual functional like state of that club look like is probably more in tune with how successful they're going to be long term. And a lot of that is about where, like, how deeply they can dig their roots into the Auckland football community, because there's 18,000 people were at that ground. Well, there were like those World Cup games, for example, there was 42,000, I think, at pretty much at every single one of those knockout competitions. Like there's a lot more than 18,000 people who are potential supporters, potential, customers, if you want to put it that way, people who's going to buy tickets and go to those games. Huge community there. There's a reason why the A-League handpicked Auckland. It wasn't an Auckland bid came up. The A-League handpicked Auckland and Canberra as well and said, these are the two markets we will accept bids from. Now do your work, those markets, and this is how that's unfolded. But they picked them for a reason, because they saw this is the place where we can, which we think ticks the most boxes in terms of putting a successful A-League team there. That's what's happened, but the success doesn't come automatic just because the ingredients are there. You still gotta bake the cake.
The Phoenix did win that game 2-1 over Sydney FC. What was your favourite footballing thing from a Phoenix perspective in that win?
Costa Barbarouses chopping inside two players at once and sending them both to the hot dog stand before curling in. I think it might have even been a left footer curling in as he attacked from that right wing. Particularly because he'd missed a couple chances in the last couple games. He'd had some good ones which he'd been burying in that initial run of form where he was scoring multiple goals game after game. Could have scored arguably should have scored an equaliser against Melbourne City in the loss away in the previous game. And I think he'd had one early in this match where it just sort of felt like, we might be getting back towards hesitation Costa again. And then he scores a winning goal like that in the second half against one of his old clubs. And sweet as. That's Mr. Barbarouses doing the stuff that's earned him an all-whites recall and earned so many plaudits throughout this season.
Did see Alex Roof has been promoted to the All Whites as well.
Is he? Is that in place of Tim Payne?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. I just saw Roof was called in by the All Whites. Obviously, Phoenix central midfielder captain extraordinaire. And there's a football Ferns squad that's just been announced as well. I can't drop any notes off the top of the dome just by looking at those names, but there is a football Ferns squad. Well, I can just check if there's any Wellington Phoenix players in that squad. Mackenzie Barry is there. Brianna Edwards is there. Michaela Foster, Macy Fraser is there. And Kate Taylor. But the Wellington Phoenix women weren't as impressive. They lost to Sydney FC at Porirua Park. And I don't know, I kind of felt like that was the downside of the style of football they play. Because I get dizzy when I watch the Wellington Phoenix women play football. It's so helter-skelter. It's so... like, there's a fine line between razzle-dazzle and helter-skelter. And they, in this game at least, don't know about the other games, but in this game at least, they were definitely on the helter-skelter side of that line, where all their little turns, touches, passes, and even the intentions are just kind of messy. And I don't know what it is, but if they're like Wellington Phoenix men, you can see there's a bit of care in the passes, a bit of care in the touches. Everything's deliberate. Everything's precise. They, like, professional football teams, I think most of them understand the concept of getting the ball and moving it to space. So they're all trying to do a similar thing. When the Phoenix men, top of the league, so it's a very different situation, but it does seem smooth, and they roll through the process of going through the layers, and there's just, you can just feel comfort in knowing that this pass is going to go to that player. There's an obvious pass. They take the obvious pass. They move the ball where it needs to go. Wellington Phoenix women, they might try find the hardest pass to do, and it doesn't work. Or they might try do the hardest turn you can do, and they turn the ball over. They might try dribble into three players, and they turn the ball over. It's very helter-skelter, and Sydney FC women had the best player on the park in Courtney Vine. And if you're given a player like her and a team like Sydney FC that amount of opportunities, they're going to defeat you. And that's what they did. And another observation is just how I feel. So when the Wellington Phoenix men, when they pass the ball back to Alex Poulsen, I feel great. I feel like, oh, yeah, we're just passing to our centre-back. He's going to make the right pass. And that centre-back, he's Ryan Nelson. Like, he's just going to make the right pass. He's going to do the right thing. He's going to get us out of this mess on our own baseline, goal line type of thing. I feel the opposite when the ball goes back to Riley Foster.
Riley Foster.
When the ball goes back to the Wellington Phoenix woman goalkeeper, Riley Foster, I don't even know if her long kicks are going to a Phoenix player. You know, it's just a very different feeling, let alone the comfort under pressure when players are passing the ball back to the goalkeeper. And I think that sums up where these two teams are at.
Yeah, I mean, even if those long kicks do go to a Phoenix player, which sometimes they do and often they don't, I think Foster's distribution is relatively erratic, particularly for an import player. Like, his shot stopping is very good. Like, there's other aspects, and her leadership is also excellent. So there's obvious aspects of why she's a player that they've brought in. But I also am feeling like from where we were at the start of the season to where we are now, it just feels like that gap between her and Brianna Edwards, who wasn't in the squad on the weekend, so I'm guessing must have been injured. It feels like that gap is closing, and I'm not convinced they'll buy another import goalkeeper for next season. I kind of think maybe you just say Brianna Edwards, you had one season because the other keeper was injured, Lily Oldfeld, and you sort of got pushed in maybe ahead of when you're ready, but also showed like really impressive signs of development throughout that season. We give you another year after that working underneath someone as like a deputy, working underneath someone who's played at a high level for for Liverpool and in the was that in the English top flight? Some of it might have been. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, you have that next year to learn under sort of a mentor, and then the year after that, you come out from under the shadow of the mentor, and you're just going to be our starting keeper because I don't think there's that much of a difference there. And maybe could have used a midfielder instead because I mean, you're spot on about the stuff you say about the sort of helter-skelter things. Because I've been thinking about that. I've had from the start of the season, I've had a draft somewhere of getting ready to write a thing about Paul Temple's small ball tactics. And the reason I haven't written it is because I haven't seen it. Like I don't know where that went. I haven't seen the small ball stuff since about the first month of the season. And there's even when it was something that was being highlighted, I think a lot of it was just Macy Fraser, and you still see it a bit when Macy Fraser's on the ball. But Macy Fraser combining, the small passes you've got to combine with someone. There are times where her and Alyssa Wynnum, I think, link up really nicely, and that's a combination I want to see. Two Cantabrian juniors as well, by the way, just to continue on that theme. I've enjoyed seeing that sort of creative spark grow as the two sort of feed off of each other, but that's something that probably does need more time. But you don't get like Hope Breslin's been playing midfield in the last few games because they've run out of midfielders because Kate Taylor's been out injured, Grace Wisniewski's missed basically the whole season. Annalie Longo, who left the football Ferns squad early because they said she had a precautionary issue that they didn't want to aggravate. Well, maybe sitting on the plane going home aggravated it because she hasn't played since. It's been like a month. I don't know what's happened with that. But yeah, they're the shorter midfield, so they've got a winger/attacking midfielder playing in the midfield, and Hope Breslin it's an excellently skilled player. Like technically, she's capable of doing fantastic stuff. And when she's playing the front line, she's a little bit erratic as well in terms of she'll do a bad thing and then she'll do a good thing. But the good things often do lead to goals. She's got a fair few goals and assists this season compared to her teammates. That's good stuff. You put her in midfield and she's the one playing those miracle passes. And I get frustrated watching that. It being like there was a way easier pass you could have played there and you could have kept possession. Instead, you've tried to hit the through ball from 40 yards or whatever to someone who wasn't even looking for it. Like, they've gotten messy, and some of that is also chasing results because they're at that stage of the season. Well, I don't think they have to worry about that anymore because unfortunately losing to Sydney means they're 8 points behind sixth place and they can only get a maximum of 9 points. So Western Sydney win their next game, it's done. Like they're out, and they're basically out anyway. But they've got 3 potentially winnable games to come up. They got a midweeker. I think Wednesday night they play against, as in tomorrow night, they play against Adelaide, and then they've got Canberra away, I think, and then they finish at home against Western Sydney. So they might win 3 from 3, and that'd be a great way to finish the season. They've finished the season quite strong with their best form in each of their previous campaigns, and it'll mean they don't finish last, and they might be able to creep up to 7th or 8th or something like that, and then that'd be a fairly solid season. It wouldn't be an overwhelming success because they were targeting the top 6, and I think they were capable of getting into the top 6. But also, they've just the erratic thing has been obvious in multiple different ways, and one of those ways has been the way that their team changes from week to week, and they've had a lot of injuries. They've also rotated maybe a little bit more than they needed to at times, and they haven't always had luck on their side. I mean, like Rebecca Lake's done for the rest of the season now, and she had been excellent. Wisniewski, and I think maybe the biggest injury loss that they've had all season is arguably Marissa Vandermeer, because I remember Giancarlo Italiano talking about when he was thinking about signing an import centre back, which he ended up not doing because it turns out Finn Sermon was just as good as an import centre back. So, but during the preseason, he was thinking of that. And so I remember someone asking about it and what kind of player he's looking for. And he was talking about really specific skill sets. Like it's things that it's not just about, is this guy a good player? It's like, does this guy offer something to this team that we don't already have from other players? And for a centre back, that might be, the aerial ability. I think maybe was one that I'm pretty sure he mentioned specifically. And well, Finn Sermon is outstanding at winning headers. So there you go. He's stepped in and done that. The Wellington Phoenix women don't win headers, and they've conceded a lot of goals from defensive set pieces recently, pretty specifically because they don't win headers. Marissa Vandermeer won all of their headers. That's why she went from being a fullback to being a centre back, is because she's so good at winning headers. It's also why she was scoring a lot of goals last season, because she was the one getting on the end of Michaela Foster corner kicks. Michaela Foster corner kicks haven't been leading to goals this year because nobody's been winning those headers and putting them on target. That's a fairly significant hole in the team. It's like they've got good players who can play in these positions, but they don't necessarily add up to the sum of their parts, because there is a glaring weakness there, and they've been conceding a lot of goals from defensive set pieces. Sydney did it to them. Melbourne Victory did it to them. That's an issue that needs to be sorted out, and it might not be something that can be sorted out from the squad that they have this season. So there's little teething issues like that, but they've clearly made a significant improvement on where they were last season, which was an improvement on the season before. So it's all progress, but it didn't quite come as quickly as we were hoping for. But hopefully these last 3 weeks will be good for that.
It's progress along the same lines as the Bulldogs, the Tigers, the Dragons,
right.
and the NRL.
It's not top 8 progress.
Yeah, we went from 17th to 15th. Boom, boom. But I think in the Phoenix women case and those NRL teams, it is fair to highlight their progress. One sequence kind of summed up where they're at for me, because I think it was actually Hope Breslin who took the corner kick. And it was just one of those corner kicks.
Yeah, she has been taking corners.
That went straight out.
Yeah.
And then Sydney FC go down the other end of the field. They get a corner kick. They do a set play where it wasn't actually a header. It was the low pass to Courtney Vine who smashed it in. So it's like those things sum it up, where the Phoenix take their corner kick and it's like it's over before it even began. And then Sydney FC go down the other end of the field. They score from their corner kick. We did have an amazing performance in the Plunket Shield, and we've got 2 games being played as we speak. Canterbury are playing Northern Districts. Northern Districts are currently batting. They've got a lead of 108 runs. They're trying to put up a target for Canterbury. And Central Districts are currently batting. They're trying to chase down 173 runs against Auckland. But Wellington defeated Otago, with Michael Bracewell taking 8 wickets in the final innings to roll Otago for 99. He took 8 wickets in 11.4 overs. Crazy. Also in this game, Dean Foxcroft, off spinner for Otago, he took 6 wickets. Peter Younghusband, leggy for Wellington, he took 5 wickets in the first innings. Dale Phillips, Thorne Parks and Gareth Severin are youngsters who scored runs in this game. And Peter Younghusband also had 80 runs as a night watcher. Lots of fun stuff.
How many wickets would Glenn Phillips have taken if he played this game?
Well, he took 5 wickets at the Basin Reserve a few weeks ago, when Nathan Lyon also took 10 wickets at the Basin Reserve. And now, Plunket Shield game at the Basin Reserve, Younghusband gets 5 wickets, Foxcroft gets 6 wickets, and the Beast, Michael Bracewell, gets 8 wickets. So I
think Phillips would have gotten all 10.
I don't know. I'm not out here saying Glenn Phillips is better than Michael Bracewell. I'm a big fan of the Beast, Michael Bracewell. So I'm not saying Phillips is going to do better than Bracewell, but I know if you're a spinner at the Basin Reserve, you're probably going to take some wickets, and if you're a spinner in New Zealand in Plunket Shield, you're probably going to be doing all right, because guess what? Spinners are a factor in New Zealand cricket. And I actually think, after we were talking about the pitches in one of our podcasts, maybe the Niche Cast, maybe the Subscriber podcast, I don't know. But somewhere we were talking about the quality of New Zealand pitches, and I mean, seamers are taking wickets. No seamer had more than 3 wickets in the Wellington versus Otago game. but seamers took a few wickets, and seamers are taking wickets in other games, and I think it's just a sign of good pitches in Aotearoa where good seamers are taking wickets, good spinners are taking wickets, good batters are scoring runs. And I think this is a strong foundation for New Zealand cricket where good cricketers perform. That's what we're saying about Australia. They had the best cricketers, so on these pitches, they were victorious. Because the pitches in New Zealand, they offer spin, they offer seam, they offer runs as well. Just depends if you're good enough to make it work. Specifically, Michael Bracewell, what do you reckon? 8 wickets. I think this is so interesting because of his Black Caps contest. Like, respect to every other cricketer. I mean, Gareth Severin's a fantastic young batter. Dale Phillips is a fantastic young batter. Like, respect to everyone else involved here, but Michael Bracewell taking 8 wickets in his first Plunket Shield game of the season. He only played a couple of Super Smash games and flashed his talent there as well. Now we're coming into this phase of Test cricket in spinny conditions and a T20 World Cup in the Caribbean. Spin will be a factor for the Black Caps in both those formats. Well, we don't just have Glenn Phillips, we don't just have Ajaz Patel, we don't just have Mitchell Santner, we don't just have Rachin Ravindra chiming in if he needs to. Michael Bracewell does the same thing as those dudes, and he does it just as well. So I'm not saying Michael Bracewell needs to be a first 11 cricketer. I am saying that there are 3-4 options of the same prototype, and they're all pretty damn impressive.
And whether this is an option that the Black Caps want to go down or not, because, you know, you are, again, like crossing over players who are doing similar roles to each other, but they, like, at the ODI World Cup, they had probably, you'd say, Mark Chapman in their first 11, playing more often than not in a role which felt like it was probably carved out for Michael Bracewell, and then Chapman's filling in because Bracewell was injured. I think Jimmy Neesham did a little bit of that as well. It's like the big hitter batting at 7 or 8, but then in Bracewell, in Neesham's case, also able to be a 6th bowler. So there's a spot waiting for him there in an ODI team. T20 World Cup coming up. They're going to play a lot of T20s. This is probably the most obvious example of where Bracewell can get into the team and be playing quite regularly. Well, you might have to drop someone like Ish Sodhi in that case, which I don't know if they would, and I don't know if they should, but you can feasibly have Ravindra and Phillips in the top 5. Maybe Ravindra is in first 11 T20. I don't think that's something that he's necessarily proven, but then also every opportunity he's taken in the last 12 months. So maybe give him some warm-up games to go, and that might not be a question anymore. I don't know, but you can fit. Phillips is definitely going to be in there. Bracewell can pretty easily slide into like 7 or something like that. And then you could arguably still have Sodhi and Santner. You definitely at least still have Santner. In a test team, Phillips and Ravindra, I mean, you might be in a situation where you're looking at Phillips or Bracewell, and I think in that case you're taking Phillips because he's got a better proven test record. And also this is probably the format which least suits Michael Bracewell, even though he has had a decent little spell of it. In conditions that are spinny conditions, you can find a way for him to slide in there alongside those other guys as well. Like, they do similar things. We're talking about, like, you know, big hitting off spinners type, the archetype there, but you can kind of fit everyone in if you're in those kind of conditions where you are amenable to wanting to pick extra spinners. Like, that's the Black Caps, we've probably clowned them a little bit for this in the past, of trying to manufacture all-rounders. But when you do have all-rounders, and sometimes conditions are what determines whether someone is an all-rounder in these conditions, but not in other conditions, obviously. But when you do have all-round players who can make the top 7 as a batter and also bowl you regular overs and more or less any wicket that you happen to be on, it makes picking a team so much easier. Like, this is why they're trying to do that, is because when you actually get to the end product of it, it's pretty amazing to be able to like fill in a squad around these guys when you've got someone who can do a little bit of both slash a little bit of everything in someone like Phillips's case.
And I think the subtleties in how they bat is helpful. Because in this game, Bracewell was batting down the order, and I wrote about this in my review of the game on our website, theniche-case.com. Bracewell was down the order. So he, like, Peter Younghusband was the night watcher, so he went up the order, so everyone drops down a spot. But Bracewell was still behind Blundell and Abbas. And that's the Black Caps role. And I wrote it because that's the Glenn Phillips role. But Glenn Phillips took that role from Michael Bracewell, who had taken that role from Rachin Ravindra. So he has, but the thing is, when Michael Bracewell goes down to Wellington, you kind of assume, okay, Michael Bracewell is a big Donny, he's the beast, he's going to be batting in the top 5. Well, he wasn't. I'd also add Tom Blundell didn't really score any runs for Wellington either. But the Bracewell, I think he has found a groove as a real powerful hitter and a spinner. Whereas I think Phillips is more of a pure batter and just X-factor cricketer. Rachin Ravindra, he's a top 4 batter who bowls a little bit of spin, a bit of spin. Mitchell Santner's more of a spinner who can bat. And they can all kind of hold the fort. They can all smash boundaries. Like, there's a lot of variety in how they operate as spinning all-rounders. And to your point about trying to manufacture all-rounders, these dudes have done the mahi in domestic cricket. Like, Glenn Phillips churned out overs in domestic cricket. Michael Bracewell has churned out overs in domestic cricket. It's not like they just made a switch to bowl more in the Black Caps environment. They
went through the steps.
They went through the process of becoming high-quality all-rounders, and I think whether you try and fit as many of them as possible into a T20 first 11, into a Test first 11 for the right conditions, or you just pick the best, because this competition is going to bring out the best in these players as well. Quick word on women's cricket. So the White Ferns are starting their series against England today, soon after we end recording. Sophie Devine won the Women's Premier League with Bangalore. Amelia Kerr was playing for Mumbai. They were both solid in the Women's Premier League. The thing that I'm thinking about heading into the series against England, neither of them will play the first game, so it'll be interesting to see who. I think Michaela Gregg was promoted to the White Ferns squad as cover, and she was the best player in the North Island versus South Island T20 series, so that's cool. But Michaela Gregg, what did she do against England A? 27 runs at an average of 13, strike rate of 81. So she scored, in 2 games, she scored 27 runs at a strike rate of 81. So she was the best player in the North Island versus South Island T20s, but she wasn't so good for New Zealand A against England A. Then she gets called up for the White Ferns. So it's a bit messy there. So that's to absorb the late arrivals of Devine and Kerr. And coming off that Women's Premier League, I think the most important players for the White Ferns are the best players. Susie Bates, Maddie Green, Sophie Devine, and Amelia Kerr. And I think the only way they're going to win games against England is if those players dominate. This is one of the situations where it's less about the role players. When you're playing Pakistan and Bangladesh, then I'm kind of looking for the role players to chime in. The only way the White Ferns are competitive against the best teams in the world is if their world-class players play to the best of their abilities. If they don't do that, then the role players don't stand a chance, right? Like, the best players have to lead that. They won't have Devine and Kerr for today's game, but they will get them back. And I'm just curious. I want to see what they do. Because unless Sophie Devine has not been in good T20 form. She did win the Women's Premier League. She did play a knock in that final. But she wasn't dominant in the Super Smash. Her White Ferns T20 batting has diminished. She's holding steady as a bowler, but her world-class batting isn't quite on show in New Zealand or for the White Ferns. And so what happens? Did she gain confidence in the WPL? Is she bringing over some winning mana? Hopefully. Hopefully. Because the way this tour is played out, the White Ferns group won 2 games against England A. We expect that. Then England A won 2 games against New Zealand A. Kind of expect that. So they've gone as expected, and now the White Ferns are underdogs for 5 T20s against England, and they are underdogs because there isn't really an advantage playing in Aotearoa, a home field advantage for the Black Caps or the White Ferns. The NBL finals are also happening with a couple of Kiwis involved. Shea, the one and only, best defender ever in the NBL. He's playing for Melbourne United. Melbourne United also have Flynn Cameron getting a bit of finals experience. And Tasmania, the Jack Jumpers, they've got Tommy Vodanovich, who seems to just win in the NBL. That's all he does. Drop a bit about Tommy Vodanovich and his winning ways in the NBL, but also I want to put that spotlight on Shea, who, as you wrote in our newsletter on Monday, he played 26 minutes in the first game, which was a win for Melbourne United. 8 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds. And that was kind of a mediocre outing for Shea. But he helps his team win games. That's what he does.
Yeah, mediocre by his standards, but also that's only really the offensive end, the stat hoarding end. You take into account the fact that he was, I think, plus 17 while he was out on the floor in his 26 minutes, I think, around about what he played, and helped set the tone as the best defensive player for the best defensive team in a defensive outing that was pretty much what set it up for them. Was like, I think all their dudes were saying afterwards, like, yeah, the game 1 victory was springboarded by how well they started defensively, and we know that is Shea territory. Well, there you go. That's Shea helping set things up, and it's not the Melbourne versus Perth blockbuster that we're expecting that for most of the season seemed to be forecast, because Perth got upset by the Tasmania Jack Jumpers and on their own, well, 2 games in a row, but the decisive game 3 was on their own court as well. So that was a surprising one. That Jack Jumpers team, we don't get a lot of Tom Vodanovich. He was a mid-season injury replacement, so he's sort of like, he just pops up sometimes here and there. The fact that their game was won by 20-odd points, and the first one did mean some garbage time at the end, so Flynn Cameron got about a minute at the end, and Tom Vodanovich also got about a minute at the end. Didn't see Walter Brown. He's the other one for Tasmania. He's a development player, but because he's a development player, he's on the lower end of the contract spectrum, so didn't expect to see him. He did get a little bit of playoff experience in the last round. There was another game where, in fact, I think it was actually the play-in before that. There was a game where Walter Brown did at least get on the court for the closing stages, so that's cool. He's soaking up the atmosphere as a young player in a finals-worthy team. But Tom Vodanovich, if anyone knows what a finals-worthy team means, it's him, because he's in the finals this year with the Tasmania Jack Jumpers. I don't think they're going to win, but he's in the finals. He's playing NBA finals with them. Last year, he was playing NBL finals with the New Zealand Breakers. They didn't win, but they pushed it all the way to a game 5. They got as close as you can get without winning. And the funny thing about that was he was playing against the Sydney Kings, whom he had been playing for a year earlier, when the Kings not only made the NBL finals, but won the NBL finals. Tom Vodanovich was an NBL champion. So he's played 3, and we can say played as well, because he did get on the court for the last minute of this game for Tassie. He's played NBL finals in 3 consecutive seasons with a different team each time. So wherever he goes, I mean, the Kings aren't in the finals this year. The Breakers aren't in the finals this year. But the team that Vodanovich has ended up on, they're in the finals this year. Wherever he goes, they just make the finals. And I guess that's Tom Vodanovich for you. He's not necessarily a big minutes player for any of those teams, but so I don't know, something about him. The dude's got an aura or something. He just hovers around winning franchises, and team places where he goes, they start winning. Because the Breakers, what were they doing the year before Vodanovich joined them? Well, Vodanovich was winning the NBL championship with the Sydney Kings. The Breakers were finishing last. He joins the Breakers and they make the finals. He leaves the Breakers and they're losing in a play-in game, and his team that he joins instead winning play-in games and going and then upsetting the Perth Wildcats to make it all the way to the NBL finals again. Something about that dude, I don't know who he's playing for in the New Zealand NBL championship, and I don't know whether that translates, but if you've wherever he's going, I'm sure they're going to be pretty stoked with that, because that actually starts in a couple of weeks. By the way, they've started the preseason blitz, whatever they call it, for the men's NBL. I don't know if the women's one has started, but I think they're anyway. We're coming in close to New Zealand NBL season as well, which is another one to keep an eye on the basketball front. But yeah, Tom Vodanovich, serial winner.
Do you want to just drop a couple of quick thoughts on this Football Ferns squad that was named to face Thailand in Christchurch?
And guess where they're playing? Yeah,
they're in Christchurch. 2 games early April. It does look like a pretty strong Football Ferns squad. What comes to mind when you're scouting through that squad list?
Pretty strong squad. I'd say stronger than what they had for the Oceania games recently as well. So it's and against the team that they beat most recently, they played Thailand right before the World Cup and were victorious on that occasion. Couple notable recalls. You got CJ Botts back in after missing the last couple tours. Michaela Moore also was dropped at one stage, and she's back in there. Both of them have just been out in outstandingly good form for their club teams, Leicester City and Glasgow City, respectively. Fairly so, like there's no debutants there that I can think of. No, because Brianna Edwards and Macy Fraser debuted in the last thing, so no debutants. Paige Satchel is back in as well. Malia Steinmetz, a few of these players who were injured for the last tour and now are back, having regained fitness at their club things. No Betsy Hassett. She is apparently pregnant. So there's 2 pregnant Football Ferns right now, because Olivia Chance is close to giving birth, I would think, at this stage. She's quite deep in her pregnancy, but Betsy Hassett apparently also having a baby. So 2 of the more senior players there, both midfielders / attackers, absent. Annalie Longo, I see, also hasn't been picked, and so I don't know if that's a situation continuing with the whatever injury she happened to have. But I also, while Ali Riley has been recalled, there is no place for the other co-captain, which is Rhea Percival, who the most capped Football Fern of all time, but also, she was that's the weird thing is that she was quite good for the Football Ferns at the World Cup, where she had rushed back from a knee injury and did a pretty excellent job for them, apart from that one time where she missed a penalty in the first game. But she has not looked the same at club level, and there's just something about, like, I'm seeing her missing a lot of tackles, and that's just not Rhea Percival, right? Rhea Percival, you expect her to just be crunching people and winning the ball over and over and over again. And I don't know if that's hesitancy coming off a serious knee injury, or if it's maybe a little bit of age, or the combination of doing those, coming back from a knee injury at this stage of her career. But definitely just wasn't the same intensity for Spurs. And then she went on loan to Crystal Palace, and now in the second tier, and now for Crystal Palace, she's gotten back to playing regularly again, but she's playing as a right back. And yeah, I don't know. The last tour she stepped off because she said she wanted to, focus on getting back to playing regular week in, week out club football, which is understandable. I haven't read the thing, but I would assume she's probably said the same thing for this. And yeah, given that Klimkova has said she views the Olympics as a sort of not so much as a tournament in and of itself, but as a major milestone or stepping stone on the way towards the 2027 World Cup, I think it is kind of notable that, even though they're all for different and understandable reasons, I do think it's kind of notable that we have a squad here that doesn't include Rhea Percival, Betsy Hassett, Annalie Longo, Erin Naylor, who's dropped out of the mix now, seems to be the 4th choice, and Brianna Edwards is just being picked ahead of her, which understandable, because Naylor's at Bayern Munich, sure, but she's also the 3rd, 4th choice keeper at Bayern Munich and hasn't played a game for them this season. So that's just sort of a phase down in her career, I suppose, and that comes with consequences, which means you don't necessarily get picked for national teams. That's, to be honest, how it should be. But I do think there's a little bit of especially because we're likely to see Macy Fraser, I think, continue having a fairly big influence like we saw in the Oceania games. Well, here's against an Asian Confederation team. Can you do the same thing? Well, probably, because she does the same thing for the Wellington Phoenix at a similar level to where many of these other players are playing. There might be a little bit of I don't know, changing of the guard kind of process, which I've already noticed. I've already written about it, that this has been going on for a few tours, but I think this tour might hammer that home a little bit further.
Beauty. Let's wrap up our niche cast there. If you did appreciate
by the way, did you, just before I finish that, did you see who Alex Roof is replacing in the All White squad?
Was that Chris Wood?
Chris Wood and Joe Bell. I don't know if Roof is going to play striker and midfield, but Chris Wood, Joe Bell, and Tim Payne all ruled out. And as far as I know so far, only Alex Roof are coming in. I did say during my write-up, like, it's not a controversy that Alex Roofer hasn't been picked. Like, he might be the Phoenix's player of the season, and there's a bunch of Phoenix players in there. But also, you play in the same position as Marko Stamenic and Joe Bell. How many defensive... And you don't really play any other position. You're basically just a defensive midfield specialist. How many CDMs do you need to carry in a squad? You're probably not getting picked, no matter how well Alex Roofer plays for the Phoenix. And he's at pretty near capacity right now. You're probably not getting picked unless there's an injury to Marko Stamenic or Joe Bell. Well, there was an injury to Joe Bell, and now in comes Alex Roof. That's hierarchy as well. That's how that goes. I'm glad, though, to see that Sarpreet Singh hasn't been ruled out, because I noticed he didn't play his most recent game. If you might get away with not having Chris Wood, but you're not getting away with not having Wood or Singh, that's when the All Whites creativity capitulates. So just wipe the sweat off the brow on that one, at least. Hopefully Sarpreet Singh will be able to go.
It is a new paradigm of New Zealand sport where there's depth. We've got spinning all-rounder depth. We've got ample Kiwis depth, and we've got Alex Roofer popping up from deep in the defensive midfielder depth chart to come into the squad. How about that? Big up Aotearoa. If you did appreciate this podcast and you do appreciate our mahi, support us on Patreon or with a paid Substack subscription, because we will be doing another podcast on Thursday, the subscriber podcast, which is strictly for those who fund the niche cache and support us. So that will be there on Thursday. Otherwise, enjoy the sport. Enjoy Aotearoa. Big up. Big up. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Cheer.